Let's get a bit more sense into this supplement of the Africa Economic Outlook from Dr. HANAN MORSY. She is the Macroeconomic Policy Director, also in charge of research and forecasting at the AfDB Group. Good evening, madam. It's good to have you here on our Rice Exchange.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you. Thank you so much. A very great day it was for you yesterday. Doing all of that virtually must have meant a lot for you, so we understand that. Thank you for coming this day. So what are the highlights of this African Economic Outlook Supplement report? And do you think this report will go a long way to shed light on for African policymakers on what to do to mitigate the impact of the virus?
Pleasure to be with you today. At the current time, the whole world is sailing in uncharted waters with corona pandemic. This shock has, created a great impact at a global level. We're expected to see the worst global recession since the Great Depression. So all this will have implications for the continent macroeconomic performance. And in the outlook, what we try to outline is that there are basically, fluidity in the situation of the pandemic. So we consider two scenarios: one in which basically there is a substantial impact of the virus, but of short duration, with lockdowns ending by mid of 2020, and a worst case scenario where there is a stronger impact of the virus over longer duration. And basically under that baseline scenario, what we expect is a contraction of GDP by 1.7% in 2020 and by 3.4% under the worst case scenario. Of course, this is, the first time in 3 decades that the continent would be expected to have a recession, actually. And we expect the recovery to actually be a partial recovery, where some sectors will take longer to recover. So sectors like tourism, transportation, entertainment are likely to take time to recover. So we expect that the recovery next year would be around 3% in the baseline and 2.4% in a worst case scenario. Of course, it's very important to keep in mind that we have a large degree of uncertainty and risks to the outlook of potential second outbreak of COVID, potential continued restrictive measures, persistent low commodity prices, and continued capital flight to safety. So all these risks make it difficult to know for sure, but we know the direction in terms that this will have a very serious impact, that definitely it will lead to a recession overall for the continent. The magnitude will depend on how the whole pandemic will unfold. More importantly, we highlighted also that there is basically a significant variation of the economic impact of COVID across African countries, depending on their sectoral structure and initial conditions. So, in particular, countries that are tourism dependent and oil exporters are expected to be hit the hardest by the pandemic. For tourism-dependent economies, we expect that they will suffer from a contraction between 7% to 10% in 2020. And for oil exporters, we expect their contractions on average to be between 2% and 4%. Also, we see that there are variations across regions, with East Africa actually projected to be the most resilient amid the regions in Africa, thanks to wider diversification and lower reliance on primary commodities. So it's expected that East Africa will be the only region where we are expecting positive growth for this year, while all other regions will experience negative growth. And the worst affected will be actually Southern Africa region. And this is due to the deep recession in South Africa that is triggered by the low commodity prices, the stricter containment measures, and the structural issues related to public utilities.
So, Dr. MORSY, you're in charge of macroeconomic policy research and forecasting, so which means that you have you've got to work around 54 countries to put this report together during the pandemic period. I'm sure working from home, not just from Abidjan, but with your team across the continent wouldn't have been an easy task for all of you to put this report together. So when you look at this report, what part of it really scares you? Is it the GDP decline? Is it the unemployment that would result, or the number of Africans that would go into more or extreme poverty if this COVID-19 virus continues to the end of this year and perhaps into 2021?
Oh, thank you. Great question. So for me, what really struck was the risk that COVID-19 poses for progress that the continent managed to do. So over the last few decades, the continent has managed to achieve some progress toward the SDGs, toward lowering poverty, lowering extreme poverty. But with the pandemic, this is likely to set back the continent in terms of these achievements. Can you hear?
Please go ahead, Doctor. Please go ahead.
So basically, in the pandemic, as a result of the pandemic, we expect 20 to 30 million people to lose their jobs as a result of economic dislocations that would be caused by the pandemic. This has a lot of implication, not just on the, at the time now, loss of these jobs, but it can have a lasting impact in terms of scarring effects of these groups that are losing their jobs, on their ability to get another job in the future. So these have long-lasting welfare impact. But also, our analysis shows that extreme poverty, which is basically the share of a population living with less than $1.9 a day, they are projected to increase in 2020 by 2%, whereas before the crisis, they were actually expected to decline by 1%. And that basically translates into about 28 to 50 million are expected to be pushed into extreme poverty in the continent between this year and next year because of COVID. And that's really, for me, that's the most worrying part, is kind of losing all the good progress that the continent has made on the socioeconomic indicators.
A final question, Dr. MORSY. Are you encouraged by the outlook that the continent's economy will recover about 3% next year, 2021? Where do you think this recovery will come from, really? What will power it?
Of course, before the crisis, Africa has been on a strong growth trajectory for the last few years, and we were expecting that to continue. So this growth will be coming from the going back, normalizing activities, and going back to basically the easing of movement restrictions, of lockdowns, restarting of all these businesses, and we expect that the recovery will not be even across sectors. We expect some sectors to be able to recover faster than others. And this is really what would lead to this, recovery for next year with 3%.
Dr. HANAN MORSY, Director in charge of Macroeconomic Policy, Research and Forecasting at the AfDB Group, we thank you for your time tonight. Thank you very much for talking to us on Arise Exchange, and we'll follow the rest of the reports as you release them region by region.